Hi, I'm Bob Vila. Welcome home again. As you can see, we've got a jump start on sidewall shingling here on the back side of the house. Today we're spending some time up on the roof, putting red cedar shingles back on it, also doing some repair to the gutter work. And inside we'll be looking at new electrical wiring, talking about what kind of cable you use when you're redoing an old house like this one. Then we're going to take a little tour of a neighboring house, also designed back in the 1800s by Hartwell and Richardson, the architects who did this place. Stick around. It's good to have you home again.
Bob Vila's home again.
Well, there's a lot of roofing repairs to be done here, but before we get to roofing, we've been repairing gutters, right, Riley?
Yes, we have.
And you and Danny Ruffini here have got a lot of the work completed. What size gutters did we have here?
They were a lot larger than what we're used to. They're 5x8s, and this is a profile of them right here.
And this is a 100-year-old piece of wood, right?
It's a one-piece gutter, and it's just something that you can't find any longer.
Yeah, but it has to be this big to carry the amount of rainwater that's being shed by this gambrel roof.
A lot of volume coming off this roof.
So how do you solve this quandary? They don't make these anymore, right, Danny?
Right. So what we did here is we took a stock 4x6 gutter, and we ripped it in half, and we ripped the top off, and we added another piece of vertical grain fur here, and glued it all back together.
And this is more practical than trying to actually mill your own gutter out of one big, gigantic piece of dug fur.
Yeah, there'd be some awful big blades for the shaper.
Exactly. So these are already installed up there, right?
Yeah.
And here's an interesting place to look at where you've had to join the gutter. Now, why don't you just butt joint pieces of gutter like this when you're doing repairs?
Well, we make a 45 cut called a scarf joint. It gives us more of a glue area to glue on. And
sure, you can see it right here. If you just made a regular cut through, just have this much area to glue on. If you have an angled cut, you've got much more surface to nail to. And what did I interrupt just now? What's this all about?
Well, we're right in the middle of putting up the plancher detail, and one of the things we have to be sure to do is continue our ventilation, because now we've re-insulated this whole house. And so we'll put a soffit vent in, and so the venting is in, we've got our face piece on, now we just put the back piece on.
And then you put another one back here, and that fills in the flat part of the overhang, which is referred to as a planchard.
Right.
Correct.
And then there's no real fascia, just a little bit of molding here.
Just a
little molding.
Okay.
Custom molding.
All right, well, the next place that we want to look at is around the back side of the house where we're doing some copper work. Okay, here on the southeast corner of the house, we can see the completed planchard detail.
Right, with the venting in here, and the trim piece that's identical to what was here to begin with.
And the built-up gutter, of course. But what's the story with all the copper, Bob?
Well, a wooden gutter to begin with is not an ideal gutter. We've taken this one and laminated it, so it's in pieces now, and you can't really expect that to stand the test of time where it's all glued together.
Yeah, we've done it for restoration purposes so that we have the look.
That's right, of what was here before. So what we're going to do is line everything with the copper, and now this will stay here for decades to come. It'll stand.
Copper liner should last for practically a century.
Right, and we have Fred Mitchell here on hand, and he's
Fred.
Hi, Bob.
How you doing?
Good. Do some work.
This was very impressive work. Now, your specialty is copper work on roofs, flashing and gutters and the like?
Right, whatever's needed.
And what are we interrupting here? You've already soldered one of the joints?
We soldered the joint, put it in 8-foot lengths as long as possible.
Yeah.
And then we'll make up our own outlets, solder the back seam, cut the hole exact.
So this has been just made up out of the sheet metal, all snipped around in there. It has the curve to fit into the curve of the gutter.
Right.
Are you ready to solder it?
And we lock the back seam and solder that.
Wow.
So then hopefully it falls right in. We put on some liquid flux to make the solder stick, otherwise it rolls off like a duck's back.
And then you've been heating those irons up.
We heat up our irons on a small propane tank, and with the acid and an iron just the right heat, we'll possibly tack one side, then the other side, so it's not going to shift.
Is the solder lead?
Half and half. We're still allowed, the roofers are allowed to use half and half. Plumbers, I think, are now 95 and 5. Is that right, Bob?
Well, what's half what and half what?
Oh, half tin and half lead.
There you go.
You're right.
Yeah, this is not going to come in contact with any kind of water that's consumed on the house, just rainwater. All right, so that shouldn't be any problem for many years to come. Now, the next question I have, Fred, is how do you manufacture this? Obviously, this has been bent on a break,
Right.
but and you've gotten that nice drip edge on it and everything. But then up here, how are you going to bend it to fold over?
Well, I usually leave that till last and not try and guess or think where it's going to be, because if it's off a little, it's a mistake, and I can form it with a little 2x6 and
So you just take this?
just take this and hold it just about at the roof line, and then with your hand and mine, we'll just fold it over nice and easy.
And it bends right
And
here.
it bends nice. Then I'll slide it up a couple of inches, and with my hand, I'll go along like that. And as you can see it,
Yeah, you can see it.
you
It
can see it
bends.
wrinkling its way in, and it's fine.
So
You
it's
got to be careful you don't run your fingernail into the wood and almost die, but
you're doing the
you
whole
just
thing
push them
just
on
with-
nice and easy.
with your thumb, yeah.
Yep.
And then you nail it right through into
and
the
then
sheathing.
we'll nail it right off.
Beautiful work. Thanks a lot, Fred. We've got to
Okay.
break for some messages. When we come back, we'll be touring another one of these great old shingled houses. Stay with me. Right here in my neighborhood in Cambridge, there's another house built at about the same time, also by the architects Hartwell and Richardson. Joining me for a tour is Brian Pfeiffer of the Society for the Preservation of New England Antiquities. Brian, tell us about this Avon Hill neighborhood. When was it developed?
Mostly in the late 19th century, but the street we're on was from the 1880s. It was farmland that had been subdivided into lots.
That's the story usually. And this is one of the most prominent houses on top of the hill here, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a really great example of Queen Anne style architecture.
What makes it Queen Anne?
Well, the irregularity of the shapes, if you look at it, you've got a tower over on one side, a gable here in the front, high hip roof, bow window over there. There's nothing symmetrical about it.
So that there are all sorts of different elements blended together.
Absolutely. And then a number of decorative elements, which you'll see inside as well. The shell over the window, the shell over the door, some of the kind of carving and decorative work that was inside and outside on buildings like this.
I tell you, what really catches my eye is the condition of that slate roof. Not just the condition, but the workmanship that went into creating that. Look at the curved slates, both on the dormer there, and if you look at that tower, can you imagine each one of those slates on that tower has to be individually cut and fitted to create that fish scale pattern, doesn't it?
And there's a particularly nice detail in the copper cresting, which doesn't survive on a lot of buildings of this sort.
Now, Brian, what do you suppose it cost to build this house?
Well, this house was estimated to cost $25,000 when the builder started, but it ended up costing him $50,000.
Amazing. And I understand it's an incredible preservation because it's belonged to Leslie College all these
Absolutely.
years.
Having a single owner for a long time really helps preserve a building.
Okay, well, let's take a look inside.
Sure.
It's a large hall, isn't it?
Yeah. In its day, this was one of the most expensive houses built in Cambridge, and this hallway was certainly a good part of that expense.
Well, the hallway is more than just a place to come in and take off your jacket, right?
Sure. For a Queen Anne house like this, it was meant to be a kind of great living hall. And the fireplace was going to create a warm center for life in the house. Little inglenook seat by the staircase was a place to sit in a cozy spot. And then all this paneling and carving.
You know, what catches your eye immediately is the condition of all this beautiful golden oak, quarter-sawn golden oak. Look at all the detailing, the grain of the quarter-sawn oak in there. The condition, though, it's never been painted, it's never been touched.
No, it really doesn't, not even chipped or marred. And I think you can see a lot of the detail of the carving is really crisp and
Look
clean.
up above the mantel, yeah, there's a pair of griffins holding onto an urn.
Yep.
Now, do you suppose that's all hand-carved?
I would take it to be hand carved by the way that the background is with the chisel marks and these wonderful tendrils that stand almost free. And then this undercutting here, the leaf, which you can only get through hand carving. You can't stamp it out by machine work.
That kind of depth, yeah. Look at these doors. You suppose we can go in through here?
I would suspect so.
Again, everything is quarter-sawn oak.
Yep.
Hey, they glide perfectly like the day they were put in. What room do you suppose this was?
Built probably as a dining room. And
Sure.
that, by the sideboard here, that would give you a good indicator of it.
Indeed. And it's not a vast room. It's maybe 16 by 20. But what detailing again, huh?
Yeah, and very cleverly worked into the drawers of the sideboard.
Oh, these are drawers. And you're right. See, the bottom of the shell is a pull. Excellent. Beautiful work. But now, what's the year of this house again?
1887.
87. So this is still not machine-made? You think this is all handmade?
A lot of houses this period would have machine-made work, but the kind of expense and care put into this house, this is mostly handwork. And I think it mostly shows, again, the chisel marks and the details of hand working as opposed to machine stamping or casting.
Indeed. And this can just be pictured as the built-in sideboard with all the heavy silver dishes and the serving pieces. And
built for display, and these little shelves provide a little extra display.
places to put everything you need at the fancy dinner. That's a marvelous room. Is the whole house done in golden oak like this?
Principally, you'd find it in the first floor in the major public rooms, and then as you go up, it might get simpler, but it depends on the house.
This is really a grand staircase. Now, it looks like the same kind of treatment that we have over at my house in terms of the three different baluster designs.
Sure. Well, again, thinking about the Free Classic, these are taken from colonial revival, in the colonial revival taste, or the Georgian taste from the United States. You'd find that in houses, fancy houses of the 18th century. They liked it, so they put it in here.
Indeed. So it's a detail that we see in 18th century Tory houses.
Sure.
And here a century and a half later almost, they're borrowing it and putting it back to work.
But using it very differently too, to make a screen up here to create a way of looking through in a picturesque way, a way it would never been used in the Georgian period.
Well, we have something similar in our place between the second and third floor runs.
Sure. You have another screen that sort of lets you know there's a staircase going up, but you don't look directly into the third floor.
The stained glass behind us here brought all the way up to a corner. Is that typical?
Well, for the Queen Anne and that period, yes, because what they've done is they've brought it as close to the corner as you possibly can, more or less pretending the structure doesn't matter, so you can get windows right up there.
They're defying the structure, yeah.
Sure.
Now, I understand that the problem with the buckling of the glass that you see here is something that occurred recently when they added glass panels or plexiglass panels to the weather side.
That's my understanding too, and for conservation, it's a real lesson, and the more you tinker with an old system with modern materials, often the more damage you do.
Indeed.
In this case, creating basically a little greenhouse between the plexiglass and the window that created those temperatures
And that
made it sag.
extreme heat melted the lead cames and caused the glass to...
I believe this is south-facing, so it'd get a lot of sun that would really make that happen.
Well, it's a spectacular house. I wish we could spend more time here. Thanks for the tour, Brian.
Well, thank you.
Our coppersmith, Fred Mitchell, is almost finished with this gutter work, but we're getting started on the reinstallation of cedar shingles up here. And you know, it's nice because we're talking shingle style houses, and originally they always had wooden cedar shingle roofs as well as sidewalls. Let's interrupt our roofing contractor, Jay Sargent. How are you, Jay?
How you doing?
Before you get too far along, let's talk about what we're doing here. Now, you've stripped away a portion of the existing roof. There's two roofs there, right?
Yep, two roofs are on this one.
And we figured that top roof was probably at least 20 years old. You see where there's a lot of curled and blistered shingles up there.
Yeah, there's a lot of popped up nails.
There'll be a lot of flashing to redo up there as well, right?
Yep, around the chimneys and the pipes.
But you always start down here at the edge, and you've got three courses on. Now, a lot of communities have a lot of concern about using a wooden shingle because of fires.
Yep, you have to use a fire-rated shingle on the roofs now so that if the house catches on fire, these aren't going to go up immediately and they won't set fire to other buildings. Or if embers land on these, they're going to smolder and go out.
Exactly. There's minerals and salts that are applied to the cedar so that they gas off, and in a fire, it actually extinguishes the embers, I understand.
Right.
It starves it, no oxygen gets to it.
Yeah.
And yet the look of it is just, you know, as pretty as any red cedar.
Yeah, it just soaks into the shingle.
Yeah.
It doesn't really change the color of them.
And Riley, you've got some of the important product right under you right there.
Yes.
Because we've got our traditional sheathing, just boards.
Yeah.
And we're going to shingle right over that, but in between we're putting in some special products. Right now this is an ice dam, right?
This is an ice dam right now, exactly. This is where you'd have a backup problem.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is putting down this ice and water shield.
Exactly.
And this is a backer for it, so it doesn't stick to itself.
And that goes right over the copper apron that's down here.
Right.
And this is a relatively new product. What's this called?
This is called Cedar Breather.
Right.
And it does exactly what it sounds like. It allows the cedar to breathe.
Yeah, if you look at it, even when it's nailed and compressed, there's still going to be a space maintained all throughout the surface of the roof so that there's a bit of air circulation underneath the shingles.
That's exactly right, because the shingles we're putting on here are dry. That's why they're spacing them. As they put them on, when it rains, they're going to absorb moisture. They'll reach what's called a saturation point, and they're virtually like sponges up on the roof. That water's going to drip through, hit the paper, and come down. But when it stops raining, they're going to be soaking wet. And if they don't dry, they rot.
Exactly. That's one of the reasons why a lot of cedar shingle roofs that are applied directly onto plywood sometimes don't have as long a life expectancy because there's no breather space.
That's right.
The cedar breather's a real good idea. Now, you're using stainless steel annular ring nails, right?
Yeah, I'm using that because there's going to be so much moisture in the roof that these are never going to rust or rot, or they'll be here as long as the roof is.
Exactly.
Shingles won't loosen up.
Now, you start down here. Why do you leave this much of an overhang? It's almost 2 inches.
Yeah, it's about 1.5 inches. We leave that so that when the water runs down, it's going to run down and drip into the center of the gutter. It can't run back at all, hit the back side of the gutter, maybe run into the house.
Okay. Now, you've got a little bit of a tricky start here because it's not a straight gable coming down. It's got a flare, doesn't it?
Yeah, it washes out. We're going to have to run shorter courses of shingles here like this to make the transition, because with the longer 18-inch shingle, it leaves a big gap.
Exactly. So what you're doing is you're putting a short course along there.
Put a shorter course and then a layer of paper to cover, you know, any of the gap, and then another short course, another layer of paper.
Jay, will you be leaving this much space in between all the shingles throughout this much of a gap?
We leave about a 1/4 inch gap in between the shingles because there's going to be so much water onto these, and they're not protected like sidewall shingles. With no paint. They're going to expand and contract, and we also need a bigger gap for the water to run out so it doesn't gather.
I'll get out of your way. I want to go on the underside of this roof and take a look at some of the things that are happening in the room. Now, underneath all those roof shingles, we have a brand new roof structure, basically. The old 100-year-old roof is back there, but you see all this new timber that is strengthening it so that we could create a cathedral ceiling in a space that's about 24 by 28. That's quite a big span. And we've made some other changes, like the partition wall that was here is now cut into so that we've got a nice recessed for a big screen TV. And we've got dormers that are going in on this side. But let's interrupt Brendan Driscoll over here, Driscoll Electric. How you doing?
Hi, Bob. How are you?
Let's talk a little bit about the wiring that you're doing in here, because essentially this is new work.
That's right.
And the architect has spec'd basically where everything goes. You're pulling wires along here right now, aren't you?
That's correct. Pulling in some circuits for some convenience receptacles and some lighting.
Yes, in
those windows.
In the ceilings of the little dormers that we've built, we'll have recessed lights. And you've already gone around the room and boxed it, I see?
That's right. Basically laid the room out, and now we're just pulling cables in to all the different locations.
All right, so where does this one get pulled in through?
This one's actually going to come down the ceiling here.
Behind the strapping, right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, what kind of cable is this that you're using?
This is non-metallic sheathed cable that we're actually...
And what size is it?
14.2.
14.2. And that refers to the strength of the copper wire that's in there, right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, most people call this Romex, and they kind of think of it as the generic name, but it's actually the brand name for a type of wiring that was invented and developed by General Cable in Rome, New York. Did you know that?
That's right.
Interesting trivia, right?
1922.
Right. And it's one of the things that's made it so easy to remodel old houses is that you can pull this cable right through the old work and fish it through walls and plaster and get it to new locations.
That's right.
Okay. Now, I think the plan calls for a built-in in this location, a cabinet that'll store videos and the like. Now, when you put a box out and you know you're going to have a cabinet in front of it, have you got it in the right place?
We're actually going to bring that out another 1/4 inch, Bob, so that it's flush with the surface.
Okay. Okay. No, that was my main concern. All right, Brendan, I'll get out of your way. We've got a break for some messages. Don't go away. I'm afraid that's it. We're running out of time. Come home again next week when we're going to be building a deck off the kitchen door as well as a little privacy fencing, and hopefully our windows will be here. Till then, I'm Bob Vila. It's good to have you home again.